They beat me, humiliated me, and forced me to watch as my wife willingly became their plaything. Her boss mocked me, sending a sickening video and warning me to stay out of their way. They thought I was broken, that I would remain helpless forever. But while they laughed, celebrating their lust and power, I was silently setting their world on fire. Soon, my cheating wife and every last one of them would beg for the mercy they never showed me. I had always believed in loyalty. It was something my parents had taught me, a value I held close in my marriage to Sarah. We had been together for 8 years, years I thought were filled with love, trust, and partnership. We had built a life, a home, a future. But betrayal rarely begins with obvious cracks. It starts as a whisper, a shadow, something you don't notice until it becomes a chasm too deep to ignore. Sarah had always been ambitious, a woman with dreams bigger than most. She worked as a manager at a prestigious firm, and I admired her drive. She was smart, confident, and her successes seemed to shine through. But as her career soared, our relationship slowly crumbled. It wasn't immediate, just a gradual shift, a growing distance, less interest in the little things that used to bring us together. Late nights at the office became common. Weekend trips with friends I was never invited to. Conversations grew short, her responses vague. I noticed how she kept her phone face down, how she dodged simple questions about her day. The signs were there, but I couldn't bring myself to confront them. Not until the moment when everything shattered. One evening, I came home early, excited to surprise her with dinner, hoping to reconnect. But instead, I walked into a nightmare. Muffled voices led me to our bedroom, and there, tangled in each other, were Sarah and her boss, Rick. The man who had always hovered around her, the man she spent countless hours with at work. They didn't notice me at first. I saw the look on her face, the pleasure, the satisfaction that I knew wasn't for me. The ground beneath me felt like it had collapsed. Then they saw me. Rick, ever the smug, charismatic leader, grinned. "She's mine now, buddy," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You were just a stepping stone for her." I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I was nothing but a joke to them, a ghost in my own home. Sarah didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She didn't even acknowledge me. Instead, she carried on as if I weren't there. The silence that followed was suffocating, but the worst was yet to come. A few days later, I received a message from Rick. A video. Sarah, willingly with him. Her face showed the same expression from that night, pure, unfiltered pleasure. The video ended with Rick's voice, "Stay out of our way. You don't matter anymore." The words crushed me. They weren't just sleeping together. They wanted me to know my place, to remind me how powerless I was. And Sarah? She didn't care. She had already moved on. They thought they had broken me. That I would disappear, too weak to fight back. They were wrong. The pain in my veins turned into something colder, darker, something sharper than rage. This wasn't about revenge. It was about destruction. I knew I couldn't lash out blindly, they would win. I had to be patient. Strategic. It wasn't enough to hurt them. I had to take everything they took from me. I started gathering information. Watching. Learning. I combed through Rick's financials, Sarah's accounts, every dirty little secret I could find. I changed. The broken man they mocked slowly disappeared, replaced by someone who moved in silence, who waited for the perfect moment to strike. It started with Rick. His business dealings were far from clean, and I made sure the right people got proof of his tax fraud, embezzlement, and illegal transactions. The scandal hit fast. Within weeks, his partners distanced themselves, and the authorities began sniffing around. But that was just the first crack. Sarah wasn't innocent in this. She had helped him. So I made sure the media had her story too, her complicity, her betrayal, her lack of loyalty. The public turned on her. Friends, colleagues, even family started to pull away. She tried to act like it didn't matter, but the weight of shame is a slow, crushing thing. Weeks passed while they reveled in their affair, oblivious to the noose tightening around them. Then the first real blow landed. A journalist called Rick's company, asking about the financial leaks. The press swarmed in, tearing apart his credibility. Investors pulled out, business deals crumbled. The charming entrepreneur was now a liability. Then came the personal collapse. His criminal exposure mixed with the public disgrace of his affair. Social media tore him apart. People whispered. Friends turned cold. His world, once built on power and admiration, cracked at the foundation. And Sarah? She thought she had escaped the worst. That she could weather the scandal. But she never saw me coming. I waited until her shame was at its peak, until she had nowhere left to run. And then, I delivered the final blow. The pressure was overwhelming, and her career was on the line. Her image had been tarnished by the scandal, her colleagues had started avoiding her, and the company was beginning to question her loyalty. But I needed to take it further. I began by sending a confidential letter to Sarah's company's CEO. The letter detailed her complicity in the fraud scheme Rick had been running, emphasizing how she had used her position to cover up financial discrepancies and even actively participated in decisions that led to money laundering. I also attached hard evidence, emails, bank transfers, and fake invoices that proved her involvement. The letter didn't go unnoticed. A day later, she was called into an emergency meeting with the board of directors. When she walked out of that meeting, she wasn't just embarrassed, she was terminated. Everything was falling into place. Rick's reputation had been irreparably damaged, and now it was time for the ultimate showdown. I invited Sarah and Rick to meet me at a restaurant, an upscale venue where I knew they would feel comfortable, thinking they had won, thinking they had walked away from the wreckage of their lives without facing any consequences. But they were mistaken. When they arrived, they both wore masks of arrogance, as if they were in control. They sat across from me, and I could almost see the self-satisfaction radiating from them. "How's everything going, Ryan?" Rick asked with a smug smile, as if he hadn't just ruined my life. "Actually, it's going pretty well," I replied, my voice calm. "It's funny how quickly things change, isn't it?" Sarah froze, the color draining from her face as she realized something was wrong. But it wasn't until I placed an envelope on the table that they both started to panic. "This is for you," I said, smiling coldly as I slid the envelope across to them. Rick picked it up, his hands shaking slightly as he opened it. His eyes quickly scanned the contents before widening with shock. "What is this?" he asked, his voice rising in confusion. The envelope contained the final blow, the confidential documents proving that Rick had been embezzling money from the company for years, along with evidence that he had been involved in several illegal side deals. The documents also included photos of his relationship with Sarah, which would have been devastating to his professional life. It wasn't just business that was on the line anymore, it was everything. I had already made sure this information had been distributed to the right people, the press, the authorities, the board of directors. The final nail had already been driven into their coffins, and now I had just made sure they were both completely exposed. It took less than a week for their world to collapse. Rick was fired from his company, arrested for embezzlement, and found guilty of fraud. The press coverage was brutal. His former allies abandoned him, and the business empire he had built crumbled. No one could ignore the evidence of his corruption. As for Sarah, her career came to an abrupt end. The scandal surrounding her involvement in Rick's schemes and their affair made it impossible for her to find another job. Her friends turned their backs on her, and her family, who had once been so proud of her, disowned her when they found out about her affair and the role she had played in bringing down Rick's business. But the most painful thing for her was when she realized that I didn't need her to survive. I didn't need the woman who had torn my life apart. She was no longer important to me. I had reclaimed my life, and my satisfaction didn't come from watching them lose, it came from knowing that they had made me the villain, but in the end, I had become the hero of my own story. When it was all over, I walked away from the wreckage of their lives, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I had proven my point. Betrayal has consequences, and it's never worth destroying someone for your own gain. I never sought forgiveness from Sarah. She had lost her chance when she chose to betray me, to destroy the trust we had built. Her humiliation was the only payment I needed. And as for Rick, his greed and arrogance were his undoing. He had thought he could outsmart me, take my life, and enjoy the power. But in the end, he lost everything.